You were taught that power comes from kindness, that if you live with honesty, fairness, and a good heart, the world will reward you. But what if that's a comforting illusion? What if history doesn't favor the good-hearted, but the ones who mastered fear, the ones who struck before being betrayed, who accepted that in an unfair world, morality alone is not enough to survive? This video is not about glorifying cruelty or defending tyrants. It's a psychological mirror held up to a brutal truth we rarely dare to face. In the game of power, mercy can be fatal. Machiavelli, a 16th century thinker exiled and stripped of influence, wrote a book so raw, so dangerous in its honesty, that the church tried to suppress it. It was called The Prince. And in it, Machiavelli didn't teach you how to be good. He taught you how to endure, how to stay standing when others fall, how to lead not by love but by fear. That might sound harsh, but ask yourself this. Have you ever given too much, waited too long, trusted too easily only to be betrayed? Have you ever believed that if you just did the right thing, no one would harm you? Machiavelli exposed the fallacy behind that belief. He showed that the world does not hand power to the just. It rewards those who seize it, those who are not afraid to be feared, because fear, unlike love, is stable. It keeps people in line even when they resent you. And in the harsh theater of survival, that may be what makes all the difference. By the end of this video, you'll understand why fear creates order when kindness invites chaos. Why mercy, in the wrong hands, becomes a weapon against you. And why, in a world where appearances rule perception, revealing your true intentions too early might destroy you before you've even begun. This is not about becoming a monster. It's about understanding the rules of a game most people don't even realize they're playing. And once you do, you'll never look at power, leadership, or even your own choices the same way again. Part 1: When kindness becomes a death sentence. It sounds noble to lead with compassion. We love the idea of the gentle king, the merciful leader, the person who rises through kindness rather than force. But history tells a colder story, one where softness invites betrayal, where mercy is interpreted not as strength but as weakness, and where a single moment of hesitation can become your downfall. Consider Louis XVI of France. He wasn't a cruel ruler. He believed in fairness, compromise, reform. In a time of chaos, he tried to be the king of the people. He reduced harsh laws, shared power, listened to his advisors. And yet, that path led him not to admiration, but to the guillotine. The very people he tried to serve saw his mercy as incompetence. In a revolution, ideals do not matter, control does. The same pattern repeats across time. Julius Caesar was beloved by the Roman people, admired for his generosity, but he forgave too easily. He trusted too deeply. And in the end, those he pardoned, Brutus among them, stabbed him 23 times in the Roman Senate. The message is clear. In unstable systems, kindness doesn't buy loyalty. It signals vulnerability. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince who is too merciful invites chaos." Not because mercy is inherently wrong, but because people exploit what they do not fear. In psychological terms, humans are wired to respond more strongly to threat than to goodwill. Our survival instincts prioritize dominance and clarity over nuance. When a leader hesitates, the brain registers uncertainty. And in social hierarchies, uncertainty means danger. That's why even in the modern world, we see the same pattern. The CEO who fires half the staff is called brutal, yet admired for decisiveness. The politician who shows no leniency toward opponents is labeled cold but remains in power. We don't consciously admit it, but deep down, we equate strength with safety. And kindness, in a world of predators, with risk. Of course, this doesn't mean one must be cruel to lead. But it does mean that unguarded mercy is a gamble. If not backed by strength, it becomes an open invitation for rebellion. Because people respect lines they cannot cross. They do not respect boundaries that shift with every plea. So ask yourself, has there ever been a time when you gave someone the benefit of the doubt and they used it against you? A time when your good heart left you exposed and you paid the price? If so, you've already lived a fragment of Machiavelli's truth. The world doesn't always reward virtue. Sometimes it consumes it. And in such a world, the real question becomes, how can we remain human without becoming prey? Part 2. The psychological roots of our obedience to fear. There's a reason why fear holds such a tight grip on our minds. It isn't simply a tool of tyrants, it's wired into the human brain. From an evolutionary standpoint, fear kept our ancestors alive. The lion wasn't loved. It was respected, avoided, obeyed. Not because it made promises, but because it posed a threat. And that primal instinct still governs much of our behavior today, even in boardrooms, classrooms, and political arenas. Studies in behavioral psychology show that when people perceive someone as dominant, they are more likely to defer, even without realizing it. We crave predictability. We obey those who signal strength, not just physically, but emotionally, those who make decisions without flinching, who don't ask for permission. Love is warm but uncertain. It depends on mutual benefit, on conditions being met. Fear, by contrast, is clear. It says, step out of line, and there will be consequences. That clarity, uncomfortable as it may be, creates psychological safety. In Western culture, we're often told that leadership should come from inspiration, not intimidation. That the best leaders are servant leaders, empathic, gentle, self-sacrificing. But behind closed doors, we admire decisiveness. We equate confidence with authority. We may dislike the boss who never wavers, but we follow them. Even Machiavelli himself did not argue for cruelty. He argued for control. Fear, properly managed, was not sadism. It was structure. Without structure, societies collapse. In a school, if a teacher is too lenient, students test limits. In a home, if parents never say no, the child grows anxious, not free. In politics, when laws are enforced arbitrarily, chaos replaces order. And so the human brain learns often unconsciously that fear preserves the world we understand. In moments of crisis, people don't look for the kindest leader. They look for the one who won't flinch. Think of times when societies turned to strongmen during uncertainty. The Weimar Republic collapsing into Nazi control. The Russian Revolution spiraling into Stalinism. These were not accidental shifts, they were psychological inevitabilities. When we feel unsafe, we choose fear over hope, command over cooperation. We are drawn to those who promise certainty, even if it comes with a heavy hand. It's a tragic pattern, but an honest one. So what does this mean for you? It means that if you want to lead, to guide, or even to protect yourself, you must understand what truly commands respect. Not surface-level niceties. Not desperate attempts to please, but strength. Inner resolve. The ability to make hard decisions and stand by them. People won't always like you. But if they know you're not afraid to act, they'll think twice before crossing you. And that hesitation, that pause, may be the very thing that keeps your power intact. Part 3. Machiavelli and the exile that changed history. In 1512, Niccolò Machiavelli was stripped of everything. Once a respected diplomat in Florence, he had served the powerful Medici family, navigated international politics, and dreamed of a republic guided by reason. But power, as he would later write, is not loyal to reason. It's loyal only to itself. When the political tide shifted, Machiavelli was cast aside. Arrested, tortured, exiled. Not because he had failed, but because he had trusted the wrong people. And in that humiliation alone, disgraced, forgotten, he did something most men would never think to do. He began to write. Not a confession. Not a plea for forgiveness, but a manual. A blueprint. A book that would outlast kings and emperors. It was called The Prince, and it was born not from idealism, but from raw experience. Machiavelli had seen what happened to good men in a world ruled by cunning. He had watched as treaties dissolved, as alliances crumbled, as the kind were exploited and the strong took everything. And he knew deeply, painfully, that to survive in such a world, one could not rely on goodness alone. The Prince is not a book of morals. It is a book of mechanisms. It doesn't ask what is right. It asks what works. And what works, according to Machiavelli, is this: fear creates order. Control maintains power. Mercy, unless calculated, is a liability. Many historians have misread him, branding him a cynic, a schemer, even a devil. But Machiavelli didn't hate humanity. He simply stopped pretending it was something it wasn't. He wrote with the clarity of a surgeon, cutting through illusion. And what he uncovered terrified the elites of his time. That's why the church banned the book. Not because it encouraged evil, but because it revealed the rules behind the performance of virtue. He wrote that a ruler must learn how not to be good, not to be cruel for cruelty's sake, but to be flexible with morality. To understand that appearances often matter more than substance. That deception, if it preserves the state, is not sin, it is strategy. In a way, Machiavelli was one of the first modern psychologists. He saw leadership not as a divine right, but as a theater of perception, discipline, and calculation. And though he died in obscurity, his words outlived kingdoms. Presidents, generals, CEOs still quote him sometimes without even knowing it. Because the game he described is still being played, and the price of ignoring his lessons is still the same: exile, betrayal, or worse. So next time you think of power, don't think only of charisma or popularity. Remember the man who lost everything and in that darkness discovered something more lasting than approval: the brutal code that governs those who rule. Part 4. Why fear lasts longer than love. Love is beautiful but fleeting. It burns bright, then fades. It depends on admiration, trust, and mutual benefit. But what happens when admiration turns to doubt? When trust is broken? When people no longer benefit from your presence? Love vanishes. That's what Machiavelli saw over and over again. Leaders who were once adored suddenly found themselves overthrown. Not because they failed their people, but because the people changed. Desires shifted. Loyalties fractured. And love, being conditional, did not protect them. Fear, on the other hand, endures. Not because it inspires affection, but because it creates certainty. Machiavelli never said that it was good to be feared. He said it was safer. Because while love must be earned and constantly renewed, fear needs only to be felt once. A single act of calculated power can echo for years. Think of a ruler who punishes betrayal swiftly and without mercy. Even those who disagree with him will hesitate before crossing him. They may hate him, but they will not defy him. Now think of a leader who forgives easily, who avoids punishment for the sake of unity. At first, he is praised, but soon his mercy becomes expectation, then entitlement, then resentment. Because people forget kindness. They remember consequences. In the corporate world, this shows up all the time. The CEO who lays off thousands is publicly condemned, but the company survives. The one who tries to please everyone eventually loses the board, the staff, the market. Why? Because fear, unlike love, clarifies power. It signals that there is a line and crossing it has a cost. Even in close relationships, this truth appears in subtle ways. We assume that being endlessly forgiving will deepen the bond. But often, it erodes respect. People begin to test how far they can push. And when they meet no resistance, they lose the very thing that made them value the relationship, trust in your strength. Machiavelli's most quoted line is this: "It is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both." But what he truly meant was deeper. He wasn't saying, be a tyrant. He was saying, love is fragile, fear is reliable. Use both if you can. But if you must choose, choose the one that keeps your position secure. In modern psychology, we call this risk aversion. The brain is more motivated to avoid pain than to seek pleasure. Leaders who understand this don't rely on affection. They create boundaries, enforce standards, and let people know that betrayal has a price. And in doing so, they earn a strange kind of loyalty, the loyalty of those who may never love them, but who know better than to oppose them. So ask yourself, do people around you respect you for your goodness or simply take advantage of it? If you stopped giving so much, who would still stand beside you? That answer may reveal whether you are loved or merely tolerated. Part 5. The intelligence behind cruelty, how fear can coexist with justice. To understand Machiavelli is to understand nuance. He was not an advocate for blind cruelty. He did not admire brutality for its own sake. What he respected was precision, cold, strategic action done not out of rage, but necessity. There's a difference between a mad tyrant and a ruler who understands when to strike. The difference lies in control. Take Genghis Khan. To much of the world, he was a symbol of terror. Cities surrendered at the mere sound of his name. But within his own ranks, he was respected. Why? Because his cruelty was selective. He crushed rebellion without hesitation, but he also rewarded loyalty, promoted merit, protected trade, and ensured stability. Entire trade routes, like the Silk Road, became safe under his reign. This is the paradox Machiavelli saw so clearly. The man who is feared by his enemies can still be loved by his people. If he knows how to balance the blade. Western society often teaches us to think in absolutes. A leader must be either just or cruel, kind or powerful. But history shows us that the most effective rulers were both. They punished betrayal harshly, yet governed wisely. They weren't emotionally reactive. They were calculated. And that's the difference. Cruelty without reason breeds chaos. But cruelty rooted in consequence breeds order. In modern leadership psychology, we call this clarity of consequence. People feel safest when rules are enforced consistently, not through mood swings, not through passive aggression, but through firm, predictable boundaries. This applies not just to empires, but to families, companies, even friendships. A parent who disciplines fairly creates trust. A manager who sets high standards and follows through creates excellence. And a friend who holds you accountable earns your respect more than one who tolerates everything. So why do we struggle so much with this balance? Because culture tells us that harshness is inhumane. That discipline is toxic. That saying no makes us cold. But the absence of boundaries doesn't lead to harmony. It leads to confusion, resentment, and in time, collapse. Machiavelli understood that power, when used wisely, does not corrupt, it stabilizes. And the leader who dares to act, even when it's unpopular, ensures not just their survival, but the survival of the system. The key is emotional distance. To punish without hatred. To act without cruelty. To be feared, not for who you are, but for what betrayal will cost. This is not the path of the tyrant. It's the path of the strategist. And it requires a level of inner strength most people never develop. So ask yourself, when the moment comes to act decisively, will you hesitate out of fear of being judged? Or will you have the clarity to lead, even if it means being misunderstood? Part 6. The fatal cost of hesitation. Power, more than anything, is about timing. The strongest leader can fall if they act too late. The smartest strategy can fail if it's executed a moment too slow. In politics, in business, even in personal life, hesitation is often the invisible killer. And Machiavelli knew this. He saw that weakness doesn't always appear as softness. Sometimes it hides in delay, in the refusal to act when it matters most. Julius Caesar made this mistake. He was warned. People whispered in corridors, pointed to the growing threat in the Senate. But he dismissed it. He believed his popularity would protect him. That loyalty was enough. That those he had forgiven, Brutus among them, would never dare raise a hand. He was wrong. And the knives came down not just from enemies, but from friends. Now compare that to Stalin. Ruthless, yes, but not careless. He didn't wait for dissent to grow. He eliminated potential threats before they had a chance to gather strength. He moved early, decisively, and in doing so, ruled unchallenged for decades. This isn't about endorsing brutality. It's about recognizing the cost of delay. The modern mind likes to believe in second chances, in endless dialogue. But history, and the psychology behind it, often punishes those who wait. Why? Because in the realm of power, uncertainty breeds opportunity for your rivals. When you hesitate, you signal vulnerability. You give time for alliances to form, for doubts to spread, for rebellion to organize. And once that seed is planted, removing it becomes 10 times harder. In business, it's the CEO who fails to fire a toxic executive until the culture rots. In relationships, it's the person who ignores warning signs, thinking love will fix what boundaries cannot. In government, it's the leader who delays hard decisions, hoping problems will solve themselves. But they never do. They grow. They fester. They turn into crisis. And then, the window for strategic action closes. Machiavelli warned, if an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared. In other words, when you act, act fully. Don't half-punish. Don't delay the inevitable. Don't hope that a second chance will turn a traitor into a friend. Because the people most likely to destroy you are the ones you gave mercy to when they didn't deserve it. This is the hardest truth for those who lead with empathy. That sometimes your unwillingness to act is not compassion, it's fear. And that fear, when perceived by others, becomes blood in the water. So ask yourself now, what are you avoiding? What decision are you postponing? And what might it cost you if you wait one day too long? Part 7 Perception is reality, mastering the illusion of strength. In the world Machiavelli described, reality doesn't matter as much as perception. A ruler can be powerful, but if he appears weak, he invites attack. And the reverse is just as true. A leader may be on the brink of collapse, but if he appears strong, decisive, untouchable, no one dares challenge him. This is not deception for the sake of vanity. It's survival. Because in the psychology of crowds, people don't follow truth. They follow confidence. They follow certainty. They follow the image that promises safety, even if it's an illusion. History is filled with examples. Julius Caesar understood this long before he crossed the Rubicon. While his enemies believed he was still loyal to the Roman Republic, he was quietly building his army, consolidating influence. He played the humble servant, the faithful general, until one day he wasn't. And by then, it was too late. Rome fell into his hands without resistance. His power didn't come just from soldiers. It came from appearances. Napoleon used the same tactic. Before becoming emperor, he allowed others to underestimate him. He played the role of the clever officer, not the conqueror. And when he finally struck, it was so sudden, so calculated, that the world could only watch. What these men understood and what Machiavelli made explicit is that power is not just a force. It's a performance. And the moment you reveal your true strength too early, you give others time to prepare. That's why Machiavelli warned rulers never to show their entire hand. He wrote, "Men are so simple and so much creatures of circumstance that the deceiver will always find someone to deceive." It's not about being evil. It's about understanding how people think. Most judge based on surface, on posture, on voice, on confidence, not substance. In the modern world, this is clearer than ever. CEOs dress the part. Politicians rehearse emotions. Influencers curate their lives to project power, control, success, even when none of it is real. And yet, we believe them. We follow. Because we don't see the truth. We see the image. And that image is what commands influence. So what does this mean for you? It means you must control not only what you do, but how you are seen. Never underestimate the value of silence, of timing, of letting others assume you are harmless while you gather strength. If you must strike, let it be swift and complete. But until then, let the world believe you are smaller than you are. Because when you're underestimated, no one prepares for your rise. And when they finally see what you've become, it's already too late. Part 8. The Betrayal of Trust. Why Friends Are More Dangerous Than Enemies. It's easy to guard yourself against enemies. They show their intentions. They raise their voices, draw lines, wear their resentment plainly. But the true danger, the one that blindsides you, comes not from across the battlefield, but from beside you. From the smile of a friend. From the soft voice of someone you trusted. That's why Machiavelli considered blind trust not a virtue, but a fatal weakness. He understood a truth most people avoid. Betrayal never feels like betrayal until it's too late. Julius Caesar learned this the hard way. The dagger that hurt most wasn't the first. It was the last. The one Brutus held. A man Caesar had treated like a son. A man who knew his routines, his weaknesses, his habits. Enemies can hurt you, but only friends can reach you from within. Why? Because we lower our defenses around those we love. We give them access to our time, our doubts, our secrets. And in doing so, we give them power. If they remain loyal, that power builds something strong. But if they turn, it becomes a weapon. Machiavelli warned, if you must trust someone, always keep leverage. Always hold something they need more than they desire to hurt you. Because loyalty, in his eyes, was not eternal. It was transactional. People stay loyal as long as it benefits them. The moment that balance breaks, they reconsider. It's not because they're evil. It's because human nature is shaped by self-interest, far more than we want to admit. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on betrayal show that most people justify their disloyalty to avoid guilt. They reframe the narrative. I had to do it. They left me no choice. They weren't who I thought they were. And once that story takes root, trust is gone. Forever. So what do you do with this knowledge? Do you become cold, suspicious, isolated? Not necessarily. But you must stop treating trust like a gift. It's not. It's a contract. One that should be reviewed constantly. Not out of paranoia, but out of wisdom. Keep your circle small. Give slowly. Observe always. And most of all, never give someone so much power over your emotions that they can unmake you with a single act. Trust can be beautiful, but it must never be blind. Because while enemies plot in the open, friends walk through unlocked doors. And if you don't have the key to shut it again, you might not survive what comes next. Part 9. When you strike, strike completely. The law of no return. There's a moment in every conflict, a threshold, when you must decide, will you act with hesitation or with finality? Machiavelli had no doubt. If you strike, strike completely. Leave no room for retaliation. No path for your enemy to recover. Because nothing is more dangerous than a wounded rival given time to heal. History confirms this rule over and over again. Take King Richard, I of England. When his rival Henry Bolingbroke rose against him, Richard had the chance to end it. But he chose mercy. He exiled Bolingbroke instead of executing him. He believed it was the civilized choice, the honorable one. Years later, Bolingbroke returned, not as a rival, but as a conqueror. He overthrew Richard and executed him. Mercy, in that moment, was not strength. It was naivety. And it cost him his life. Contrast this with Stalin. Brutal? Absolutely. But decisive. He didn't wait for threats to grow. He didn't offer second chances to those who challenged his rule. He removed them. Completely. And in doing so, his control remained unshaken for decades. You don't have to admire his methods to recognize their effectiveness. Because power, in its rawest form, is not about justice. It's about security. About removing instability before it becomes destruction. In modern leadership, the lesson still holds. A company that allows disloyalty to fester collapses from within. A political leader who compromises with those plotting their downfall eventually falls with a smile still on their face. A person in a toxic relationship who gives one more chance often finds themselves betrayed again, this time harder, deeper, and without a way back. Machiavelli understood that when power is threatened, half measures are the fastest road to ruin. Because your enemies are watching. They're learning from your restraint. And if you don't make them pay the price now, they'll teach you one later. He wrote, never do your enemy a minor injury. If you don't finish the threat, you invite its return fueled by resentment and clarity. Mercy feels noble, but in the hands of the unworthy, it becomes a weapon. That doesn't mean every conflict must end in destruction, but it does mean that when betrayal crosses a certain line, when a threat becomes existential, you must end it decisively. Not cruelly, not emotionally, but fully. Leave no openings, no doubt, no memory of weakness, because those who are spared rarely return grateful. They return with sharper knives. So ask yourself now, who in your life have you let off too easy? Who did you warn but never held accountable? And what would happen if they came back tomorrow, stronger, colder, and ready to finish what they started? Part 10, The Ultimate Truth. Would you rather be feared or loved? So now you've seen the pattern. Not just in empires and revolutions, but in boardrooms, families, friendships. Power is not given. It's taken. It's not preserved by kindness, but by control. The world may pretend to admire gentleness, but what it obeys, what it truly fears, is consequence. And Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. He saw through the illusions of morality, through the polite performances of virtue. He understood something most people never admit, that behind every throne is a war, and behind every leader who lasts is a decision to be respected, not merely liked. But this truth makes people uncomfortable. It challenges everything we were taught as children. That good wins. That fairness matters. That love conquers all. Maybe in fairy tales. But in the world of blood, ambition, survival, it is fear that holds the throne. And yet, here's the paradox. Fear is not about being cruel. It's not about being hated. Machiavelli warned that a ruler hated by his people will fall. The art is balance. To be feared not for your rage, but for your boundaries. To be respected not for your charm, but for your clarity. And most importantly, to never make fear your identity, but your tool. Used sparingly, intelligently, at the right time, in the right way. Because the greatest leaders are not just lions. They are foxes. They see the trap before it's set. They listen while others talk. They watch while others act. And when they move with finality. In today's world, you may not lead armies. You may not sit on a throne. But make no mistake, power still shapes your life. In your career, your relationships, your reputation. And the question remains, will you play the game or be played by it? Will you speak when it's safe or when it's necessary? Will you trust because it's easy or because you hold leverage? Will you hesitate and hope or act and lead? These aren't just questions for kings. They're questions for you. For the version of you that wants to stop being used. To stop being overlooked. To stop wondering why kindness keeps leaving you empty. You've now heard Machiavelli's laws. Brutal. Cold. But honest. And the final one is this. Perception is power. Control how you are seen. Never show your full hand. And if you strike so completely that no one dares try again. So I ask you now, in a world where being good often isn't enough, would you rather be feared or loved? And more importantly, do you now understand why that question even matters? If you felt something shift while watching this, don't look away. Sit with it. Question it. And when you're ready, share your thoughts below. Because in this world, power isn't just about politics. It's about self-respect. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stop apologizing for being strong.